I'm Kirsten Ellenbogen. I'm President and CEO of Great Lakes Science Center. If you have not been to the Science Center recently, you should get to the Science Center. So many new things. 13,000 square feet of new exhibits from the summer. Lots of things going on. But I'm not here today to talk about the Science Center. I'm here to talk about your conversations with your kids about what they want to be when they grow up. And I've done a lot of research around career development, workforce development, how education feeds into that. And I want to pull that together today also with a hat on of being a parent myself, where I'm thinking a lot about this and how you actually talk to kids about careers. How many of you in high school knew what you wanted to be when you grew up? Or you thought you knew what you wanted to be? Only a few. How many of you actually went into that career? Oh yeah, all right, that's great. So when I was a kid, I watched Quincy all the time. Remember that TV show, Medical Examiner? Oh, I loved that show. And I wanted to be a medical examiner. I got into this anatomy and physiology class in my high school, and then I got to shadow one of the medical examiners. And this was in Detroit, so, you know, medical examiner in Detroit is going to have a serious job. He did paperwork all day. It could not have been more boring. I kept pushing, when are the autopsies? When are we going to go investigate the cases? And he took me through this long lecture about, look, kid, if I went out, he had the kind of same acerbic attitude as Quincy, in fact. But he said, look, if I went out and did research all day like Quincy does, I'd get fired or arrested really quickly. So it was a good experience, and then it convinced me that I did not want, in fact, to be a medical examiner. But we spend a lot of time, right, thinking about, okay, how can I help my kid decide this is what you want to be when you grow up? How do I help them on that career? How do I get them into the right pipeline, right? And there's a lot of anxiety about it. There's longitudinal data that I've studied for years where if I go up to you when you're in 6th grade and you tell me you want to grow up and be a rocket scientist, you are 3 times more likely than your peer to actually end up successfully in that career. And that kind of data, which has existed for years, makes all of us parents really nervous. What if my 6th grader doesn't know what they want to be, right? Or what if now in 12th grade, all of a sudden my child who said all along that she wanted to be an artist is suddenly coming to me and saying that she wants to be a rocket scientist? Is it all over, right? Does she have any hope of ever getting into that career? Well, it turns out that in addition to the information age and technology changing rapidly, and I don't need to go through my fancy slide presentation about how quickly technology is advancing and how quickly we've transformed in this information age. But one of the benefits that's happening for us as parents is that the emphasis on careers is giving way to an emphasis on skills. And when you look at, and I spend a lot of time talking to companies like Lincoln Electric, Parker Hannifin, KeyBank, the big companies that work with the Science Center, I hear all the time, I've got 1,000 jobs open here, I've got 600 jobs open here. Why do you have all these jobs open? Because I know people who are out of work. What is the problem, right? And a lot of it has to do with the skill set, right? And people are getting more and more refined in terms of talking about skills more than a single career path. There are a lot of things coming together that are causing this. One is that, frankly, if you look at the latest research on how long a person is going to spend in a job, a 20-something-year-old, right? Does anyone know what the new national average is? How long is your 20-something-year-old going to spend in a job before they change?
2 to 3, yeah.
National average of 3 years. That, it's jaw-dropping, right? Right? I mean, for us who grew up thinking, whoa, you know, if you do really well, you're going to be in a career for 40 years. Or even not that, even if you move beyond that to say, no, I'm going to move around, right? But in a world in which you change jobs every 3 years, that means you're also changing careers. Maybe not every 3 years, right? But You're going to change careers over the course of your lifetime. And your child will be, in all likelihood, one of the people who ends up changing their career a number of times. What that means is they need to get really good thinking about not their career interest right now, but the skills that they're interested in, and the skills that they enjoy, and the skills that they have. And if you haven't had a conversation with your child about what kinds of things, what are the skills that you enjoy, right? That's a conversation you should be having. And I'm the first person to say, I hate those touchy-feely journaling conversations that people have where they say, if you could be a car, what kind of car would you be? I hate those every time. But there's maybe your child loves those kinds of conversations, and there's going to be a way where you can figure out how to talk to your child about, well, what's the stuff, what's this skill that you like doing, right? Because you're gonna find something that actually transfers across a lot of different careers and a lot of different jobs. And being able to articulate those skills will not only help your child figure out good choices that they're applying for college, but will serve them a great deal, right, as they move through their career. That ability to really articulate and be metacognitive about the skills that they enjoy and the skills that they feel that they're good at. So the first piece is really, when you go home tonight, I'm gonna leave you with 3 things to really think about. The first one is really shift the conversation with your child from career to skills. Second thing is, with all these changes, the idea of a career pipeline, right? And I'm one of these people that went back and forth on careers a fair amount. And I got really anxious about this idea of, there's a pipeline, right? And I was supposed to do this in this age and this in this age. And you look at the research and it tells you that, right? In the past, all the research said, if you didn't have algebra in 8th grade, well, you wouldn't get physics at the right time, and then you wouldn't get and it's like a landslide. Well, things are starting to become a lot more flexible than that, right? And the idea of a single pipeline has gone away. And in fact, when you talk to people, they're much more likely to describe something that looks like a pathway. And it might even be a meandering pathway. So have you ever sat down with your child and actually talked about how you got from their age to where you are now? Or how other family members got there, right? The conversation about pathways can be a particularly powerful one. And again, there's been some great research on this. If you focus just on the end point, it can be really frustrating and intimidating for a kid to think about that. Talking about the pathway that got you there. So I try to spend a lot of time with my kids asking other adults in our life, right? How'd you get there? Well, talk about what you were doing when you were Zoe's age, and then how did you get to this career that you're in now, right? Surely there was a pathway. And a lot of times it's like this, right? And it helps a child really understand that there's not one right way to get into a career. There's going to be a pathway, and that pathway has many different entry points. It's a very powerful concept. Just changing the language that you use around talking about pathways is a very effective way to help your kid move forward in a positive way around career thinking. Last piece of this is really looking at this idea of the skill piece and being able to reflect with them and starting out with what makes you happy, right? Hopefully you're having these conversations with your kids already, but if you haven't had a chance to really step back with your child, you should never have a conversation about a career or skill development, pathway or pipeline. I don't care what you're talking about. If you don't start by saying, well, what makes you happy? What do you enjoy, right? It makes it a lot harder for the child to really understand that there's a purpose that's driving them. And we are raising Generation Z children. Have you heard this concept? So this is what children ages 6 to, I think it's 18, are being categorized in now by the futurists and people who make a lot of money by putting all of us into blobs, generational groups. And we are raising Generation Z children. And they are very, very different from the millennial generation that preceded them. And one of the things that's very different is this, very much this aesthetic around rolling up your sleeves, getting things done, doing it your way. Entrepreneurship is a big piece of this, right? And we're starting to see that language at the Science Center more and more. We focus for a lot on innovation, but we're hearing more and more from Gallup and other researchers, you need to really think about entrepreneurship. Because again, the expectation that you're going to work for somebody is really shifting. And our generation of children, Generation Z, is expected to be the tipping point to get back to the higher numbers of having your own companies and being your own boss, that we've really shifted away from in the last two generations. And again, these are futurist predictions, but they're very interesting in that there's some real alignment happening across looking at skills, having a flexible pathway, and this idea that, entrepreneurship may be critical in what you're thinking about. So when you're looking at schools, one of the things to think about is this the kind of school where they tell me that this is the only pathway that you can be on? They say, look, once you get in this program, you can't get out. You can't transfer into another program. Because I talk to colleges like that, right? If you look in Crane's Cleveland, the business paper today, this afternoon, there's a whole article today on which schools got ranked most innovative. And let me tell you, the schools that are ranked most innovative are not the ones that have the lockstep programs where you cannot change and shift and grow in your program over time. It's a very different kind of ranking system. That's why a school like Ohio State is actually ranked in that much higher than a school like Case, which I found to be shocking. But the more I talk to people at Case, as it's trying to make a lot of changes as they move forward, it makes sense, right? So it's a different set of criteria, and it changes the conversation you're having when you're on the college campuses or when you're talking to the admissions specialists. I want to leave a few minutes for questions or comments, resources you want to share, things like that. So I will pause here.
Okay, I'll throw it out. When you say skills, what skills are you talking about? Like, you're a good writer, or you're a good communicator?
Absolutely. You're a good writer, you're a good communicator, you like solving problems, and those might be very different from, right, there are people who have the skills where figuring out a page full of numerical problems and getting everything to add up at the end, those of you who do like spreadsheets in Excel, doing the little check where the column over here matches the column over there, and you get that just very positive internal feeling. If you have a child who feels really good when they get all the numbers to add up, that's a skill, and that's what makes them happy. That is different from the kind of problem solving where there's just this broad open mess, and we're not really sure what problem to solve for. But frankly, I hear that as a need more and more and more from Lincoln Electric and Parker Hannifin and NASA and other companies we work with of, look, I can take 1,000 engineers, lock them in a room, lay out the problem for them, and they can all solve the problem and get to the end point, and that's fine. What I cannot find is the person where I put them in this situation and say, this is a mess. I'm really not even sure what the problem is that we should solve. They can't find people that work well in that situation. Those ill-formed problem situations where you're really the one digging in and investigating. Solving for this looks a lot different from solving for that, right? So having those kinds of conversations, taking moments where they felt particularly successful in their extracurriculars or in their school activities, and honing in on what was it that made you feel really successful? Was it like ignore the grade, right? What was the feeling you got from it? What was the thing you really had to do differently that time? And focus in on those kinds of things. What you will find is that this skill typically goes across disciplines. So more and more and more, those of us who work in science, technology, engineering, and math are having more and more conversations with those who work in the arts. There's a lot of similarities in the kinds of skills that we're emphasizing in our education programs. And there are whole areas where the disciplinary boundaries that used to exist are really pulling down, and you see them a lot less than you used to. Other questions or comments? One of the things that often comes up when I have this conversation is, what if I'm having trouble, I cannot figure out what skills my child has. They're unable to articulate them, they don't like to reflect and think about it, they will not journal, what am I gonna do? There are some online tests and things that you can do for this. When you look around at them, look for ones that talk about help your child, helping you identify what you're strong in, not what career you should be in, right? You do not want to do the ones that are pushing you towards, that give you the little printout at the end that say, you're going to be great being a rocket scientist, right? You want the one that's really, so Strengths Finder is a good example of this, right? The one that Gallup Corporation does. There are books that you can get with it, there are online versions, there's the really long, intensive one, and then there's the cheaper, shorter one. There are lots of ways to do it, but Strengths Finder is a good example of it. Something that really helps your kids get some feedback on, these are my skills and my inclinations.
How do you have a discussion with your student who is getting ready to sign up for college or apply to college on the college to choose if they don't know what they want?
I would strongly recommend that you help your child really get reflective about not what they want, but what they enjoy, right? What makes them feel positive about themselves? What is it that they complete that makes them sit back and go, oh, yeah, that was awesome, right? What was it? It might be scoring a goal, but it might also be turning in something that's perfectly neat and working from that into a conversation. The shortcut to that may be one of those online tests like Strengths Finder to help them if they're really not being reflective about what skills they enjoy. It is definitely a shortcut to get to that and can be very, very effective. But assuring them that it's going to change over time, the career that they have, right, the jobs that they have, not making them feel like, look, all your friends know that they're going to be a lawyer or a doctor and you have no idea which one you want to be. I can rest assured, believe me, that the latest research is all showing that none of us even know what the job is that our child will have in 10 years. It just doesn't exist right now, right? There's so much change happening in that. They may in fact be some form of lawyer, but it may be a form that's not really recognizable today, right? I mean, I work with someone who focuses completely on intellectual property with music, right? He didn't grow up thinking that that's what he was going to do, right? He's highly successful in it. There's an entire company of lawyers that focus on that, right? Those kinds of things, we just can't even guess at it. And so reassuring your child that it's okay not to know that there's a specific career that they want, but they should get more practice at getting that sense of what do they enjoy and what are those skills, the things that they do across different areas that really they feel strong in. I know we're heading towards wrap up. Are there any?
Yes, what grade level would you start to be concerned when they don't know what they want to be or what they want to do? Is there a certain grade level, in education that they've had some experience with that would allow them to have a better idea of what they would like to do when they grow up?
One of the issues we run into is that a lot of education, and I say this as an educator, has not caught up with modern times. And so their experience in social studies or science class may have very, very little to do with what it might actually feel like to have a job in one of those areas, right? So that's the quandary that your child is going through. We should be very, very sympathetic to our children who face a much more distant path between, growing up, there was a much closer connection between what we did in school and how that connected to a career. It's all over the place now, right? So giving your child some time and space to understand that it's actually okay if you don't have that career in mind, assuring them that we can't even name the career that's going to be out there 10 years from now, and really starting to feel confident about doing some reflective activities or sitting down and thinking on that. You know, if you have someone who's graduating from college and they haven't had any experiences that intrigue them and make them say, gosh, I think I really might want to lean towards this area or that, absolutely, I would start to be worried. But again, when skill set becomes the piece that connects people in their jobs, not the particular job title or even the discipline that they're working in, right? So someone who's good at photography, right, could end up working in electron microscopy, because really all that is running that microscope to get the best possible photos you need to do the diagnosis. So and that's an example that's a pretty old one, right? So the modern day examples of that, as things change rapidly, it's all over the place. So assuring your kids that it's not the end of the world if they don't know the discipline that they want to get into, but making sure that they can start talking about an interest, I would say is pretty key. And that when they're in high school, they should start getting good about recognizing different kinds of skills, the so-called soft skills, right? And what those look like, and how they do in those, right? So that they know, yeah, I love playing around with numbers, or don't ask me to play around with numbers, but I love like analyzing text. That feels really good, right? Those, taking that into even a college interview and saying, what I love more than anything else is analyzing text. I did it in history class, and I did some of it in science class when we had to read some articles, and I did some of it in language arts, and I just love it. I love analyzing stuff, right? That's a conversation starter. That's an interesting thing for a college to begin to work with, because that can go in a lot of different directions. And given that your child's gonna change careers every 3 years, or God forbid, even more frequently, I don't know what the data is gonna look like in another 10 years, make them feel comfortable with that. And make yourself feel comfortable. Believe me, I'm one of these parents that, my daughter, when she was in kindergarten, had this whole concept of like, her career was gonna be going to Africa and saving lions. She had it planned out pretty well about, she was gonna skip college and get her experience through this program, and I don't know which babysitter she talked to. I was really pissed. and you know, and it was actually stressful to have a child so focused on a career so early on in life, right? Her thinking has evolved, and there's all sorts of opportunities in front of her. But what I do know from that is that she's passionate about animals, right? And that she's willing to do a lot of self-sacrifice to help people, right? Great. So those are two things I took away from that, knowing about my child. I don't think she's gonna end up in Africa with no college education saving the lions. But I learned something from that, right? So hone in on those pieces, and you can help your child articulate something that they don't even know about themselves. Anything else? I'm getting a signal. Well, thank you so much for your time, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.